Now, let's move on to the next topic of the day. Pat, you're giving me a funny look. What are you giving me that look for?
I just want you to get all this in.
Okay, we got to keep moving. I know you need the buzzer, Pat. We got to keep it moving. The next topic of the day is the Ukraine and what's going on there. And boy, I will tell you, folks, you've got to really watch the media that you're presented with a jaundiced eye. You've got to be really careful about what you believe in terms of what the media tells you. You're probably having some thoughts about this because that's what the media is designed to do. It's designed to program you to get you to think a certain way about certain issues. I was a little surprised, I have to say, that the Russians made the full incursion, and I guess we'll say it's a full incursion. I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen the video yet. I haven't seen the video that proves to me that there is a full-scale invasion and war underway. I have seen video. Believe me, I probably watched more video than most of the people listening to this audio have watched, because I've watched all the video that's available on Twitter, and there's honestly not a lot of it. There's not as much as you would expect if there was a full-scale war going on and everybody's got cell phones that they can record the war from. Right? But there does appear to be some video showing some mild skirmishing. There's some video showing helicopters flying through the air. There was even some video that folks saw that showed what looked to be an air battle with anti-aircraft guns on the ground, but it turned out to be a computer game.
They keep showing that one explosion in the background of Kyiv, of the one explosion. They keep showing that.
That's the one. That's the one they've got. That's what I'm saying. It's like they've got one explosion. They've got one column of bombed out transport trucks, and they've got one video of helicopters. And I keep seeing those three things over and over and over again, and I think there should be more video. There should be more stuff happening. I don't think we've got a good handle on exactly what's going on the ground there. I'm not sure what Russia's strategy is, but you hear the programming coming back from the corporate media who's saying, Vladimir Putin's bogged down. In fact, have you heard this? Vladimir Putin is downright angry. He's screaming at his advisors in their secret lair. It's like he's losing his mind because they told him this would be over in 3 or 4 days. They're trying to make Putin out to be Hitler. Like Hitler was totally out of control of the war and upset with his generals when things weren't going in the rosy way that they had pitched to him that they would go. I seriously doubt that Vladimir Putin made this big of a miscalculation. I think there's something else going on here. Either the goals and strategies are different, so either the army is actually doing something different than what's being projected to you on the screen. They're not actually trying to take territory. They're trying to make a quick run to cut off supply lines to most of the Ukrainian regular forces, which are in the Donbass region, in the far east of Ukraine. That's where most of the Ukrainian army is. And I think the Russians may be trying to cut off supply lines to Kiev, as well as trying to encircle Kiev and Kharkiv, the two main cities in the Ukraine, and begin to choke off the supply lines to those cities in kind of an old-fashioned siege. We're going to talk more about this when we come back.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show, and we were talking about what's happening right now in the war, Ukraine and Russia, and how it's hard to kind of figure out what's happening based on the information we get from our media. And if anything, the last 2 years has taught us is that we have to question everything that comes from our media.
Well, right. I mean, how many times on how many different stories have they misled us? We've proved that to ourselves with the actual documents, the actual facts of something. And now you expect us to trust them this time. I mean, this is like the boy who cried wolf, isn't it? At some point, you just stop trusting them because they aren't trustworthy. I mean, that's what happens. And so we're questioning everything that they're telling us about Ukraine. So constantly, when I see them putting up storylines and trying to program us a certain way, I start thinking about the opposite or other alternatives. It just doesn't make any sense to me that Putin would go into something with no planning. They're talking about, the Russian military is about to run out of weapons. They only had 3 or 4 days stockpile of weapons. I mean, I've seen all of this pushed out through the propaganda, and it just doesn't ring true to me that they would make such a tactical error as to go to war without any bullets, But obviously, I think we're trying to achieve something, which, I mean, Putin has come right out and said what he wants to achieve. I assume that he's been honest in saying what he wants to achieve, because it does make some sense to me. He wants Ukraine to be agreed to be a neutral country, to not enter NATO. That's one thing. And no missiles stationed there. No short-range ballistic missiles that could hit Russia. Seeing as how Ukraine is right up in Russia's underbelly, it's kind of like Cuba was for the U.S. And, we didn't want Russian missiles or Soviet missiles in Cuba. And I think that was pretty understandable. That made some sense to me. So we didn't want their missiles right in our underbelly. They don't want our missiles right in their underbelly. All makes sense. Seems like fair is fair to me. So I know that's what Putin said he was trying to achieve. So perhaps he thought that they could fight an information war and quickly move in and make it seem like they were overrunning the country and that they had captured the country, and then enter into these settlement talks and quickly achieve his goals. That's a real possibility. Obviously, that hasn't happened, although I'm told they did enter into these settlement talks, or at least they're meeting somewhere near the border of Belarus. And that's important because the NATO allied countries would not move into Ukraine to defend Ukraine, wouldn't provide the troops. And so therefore, basically Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has started negotiating with the other side, and they may be able to achieve what they want. Now, I see we got a caller who called in with our request to call in about Ukraine. Byron, are you there?
I am. Hey, good morning, and thanks for having me on your show. Hey, I want to know, when you have the opportunity to research it, about ICBMs versus tactical nuclear warheads, because there was legislation or something that was permitted to be used to stop a global threat, so they keep it regional. And I'm pretty sure it was under Obama's administration that the tactical nuclear warheads could be used. Am I right? I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I think you are right, Byron. Now, the thing about it is intercontinental ballistic missiles, while they have very sophisticated guidance systems, it's all based on their launch trajectory. So they launch way up into the upper atmosphere, maybe even the bottom part of near-Earth orbit, and then they basically come back down. It's basically a glorified mortar shell, an ICBM is. Now, a tactical nuclear weapon, I'm trying to think of what the distinction is between that and the ICBM. Do you know offhand?
It's just tipped. In other words, if you are somebody who's like Russia, facing another region of the world that's trying to maybe make some maneuvers, you're going to say, you know what, we're just going to have to use our tactical nuclear warheads. This doesn't show that the dome is opening. It's not going to be a massive global war. I think that it's an excuse to just make this thing regional, to bring us down economically, to bring us down on the superpower level. And Trump and Biden and the Ukrainians are probably all in on it together.
Yeah,
or
well,
maybe,
they very well could
know.
be. I mean, we know Hunter was making a ton of money from the Ukrainians.
Correct.
And we don't know what all was going on with respect to that. Well, it's a good question. What I've been more concerned about with respect to the Russians is their hypersonic nuclear missiles that they've got, which that basically, just to simplify it as much as we can, basically puts the warhead tip up into orbit. And so instead of an intercontinental ballistic, which lobs a big warhead over a long distance, so in other words, we could hit Moscow from the U.S. heartland, that would be intercontinental ballistic. This one just basically launches the warhead up into low Earth orbit, so it is orbiting the Earth at, 17,000 miles an hour?
17,000,
Yeah.
How about the correlation, another one I made recently? Elon Musk, he had all these satellites up, some of which could be seen burning up over Puerto Rico. I have witnesses down in Puerto Rico who saw those things. And then all of a sudden he's letting the Ukrainians have access to the information. He's opening up an internet that they can use with his satellites up there. So that they can get out the information of what's really happening over there.
I mean,
Who knows?
Well, that's what they say, right? But Elon Musk is a pro at inserting himself into news stories, particularly with this sort of savior posture. So, when the kids were stuck in the cave, remember, he was going to build some kind of a submersible that could reach them.
Yeah.
That never actually panned out. He was going to provide internet to all kinds of disaster areas. We're talking about Tonga. We're talking about he was going to try to provide some, I think, to Haiti and other disaster areas. I believe there was talk of Cuba at one point. So he is a pro at sort of inserting himself into the news of the day and saying, hey, we'll come up with a solution for that. Now, whether he actually comes up with a solution and whether it actually works is sometimes a different story. But with our news cycle, nobody ever follows up on it.
I don't know. I see a lot of it being, did we want a hot war or did we want a cold war? Under Biden, we got a cold war. Under Trump, it may have been a hot war. Which one phases out quicker? Which one benefits the United States? At the end of the day, we may be facing a cold war again that puts us back where Russia was against us in the 80s, 89, when the wall comes down. In other words, we may be stepping off the superpower position under Biden versus with Trump being still the remaining superpower of the world. With Russia timing up with the Chinese and the North Koreans, hello, it's an East versus West division.
Right. Well, and also look at the movement of international communism, which is still in play in some of these areas. When you look at the sizes of the economies of these different countries and of the defense spending, I mean, that is where you really get some stark contrast, at least in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, you look at the U.S. Yeah. I mean, compared to China even, China is ascendant, so China is coming up on us. But right now, I mean, we've got a approximately $23 trillion GDP every year. Our economy is producing $23 trillion, and we're spending about $778 billion of that on defense, and that's our disclosed defense budget. People,
not the DARPA.
People think that the actual defense budget may stretch to $2 or $3 trillion, and we don't know because a lot of it is dark money that's used. But when you look at China, I mean, China's got almost $17 trillion GDP economy, and their disclosed defense budget is basically about a third of ours. So it's about 200.
I think that their move on Taiwan, which is a financial institution like the old Chinese agreement with the British, with that Hong Kong agreement that really was supposed to go 75 years, but it was really 100 years when you look at it closer. Same thing with Taiwan. That's their maneuver to be the financial powerhouse. They'll make that move when they know the timing's right because they've teamed up with the Russians because they knew they couldn't do it alone, and then they'll screw each other over. It's going to be interesting. I think the next 7 years, next 2 are going to get interesting. The next 7 are going to be either face-changing or devastating. I don't know.
Well, it is going to get very interesting. I think if you're going to see China make a move on Taiwan, watch for a lot more things in the world to go awry. Watch for us to have problems everywhere. We've got this problem now in Ukraine. We're trying not to be drug into it. I don't think we should be drug into it. I've yet to fully understand what our national interest is in the country of Ukraine. Nobody's explained that to me.
It's called the Biden interest.
Well, that's right. I mean, is the interest just keeping Hunter's job? I mean, listen, as hard as it was to get this guy this job, we are not going to let anything happen that would impact that job. But let me just reference something to you here, because we just talked about the U.S. and China, the world's 2 largest economies, 2 largest defense budgets. Let's look down at Russia. Russia's got a $1.6 trillion economy. So we have $23 trillion. Their gross domestic product each year, $1.6 trillion. Now, I certainly say they're nobody to tangle with because they spend $61 billion a year on defense. But remember, we spend more than 10 times that much. We spend $778 billion a year, and these are just the disclosed numbers. So they may be off a little bit, but we're spending way more on our defense budget. We've got a much stronger overall military apparatus than Russia does. Just to give you an idea, Russia's GDP is about the same as Brazil or Australia. So, would we really consider, if Brazil or Australia wanted to go to war with us, that would be an equal power? No, we wouldn't, but we do consider Russia to be on the same footing as us for some reason. And I'm not sure that they are in any stretch of the imagination. Now, they do make very good weapons, and they are very effective fighters. But I guess we'll see how this situation in Ukraine plays out. And, Pat, I know you don't like that because you said earlier, you got to make the call, but the truth is we're not getting good information. We can't really tell what's going on the ground, and I don't know really what could come of this. I mean, it could be as far as a wider conflict. This is exactly how larger wars can get started, but I just don't know that we're going there on this one.
Well, look at it as a debt service to the business, where we're carrying that higher, like you're saying, GDP over Russia. What is the debt position of Russia? And all the gold that they and China have been buying. If I'm going to run a business and I got to pay a debt service every single month on that business because I'm pulling in a certain amount of cash flow, net cash to me as owner, i.e. I'm a corporation, I'm a government, that debt is going to catch up real quick with us. And that is what I think the timing of this correlates to the Russians doing this. They're saying, well, look, they were going to raise their interest rates, which would have put them in a debt service ratio that would be better over a period of time. But now we can't even raise our interest rates. We can't even cover the interest alone. If we raise those interest rates on those treasuries, who knows? So I think
it's a great point.
It's on purpose.
It's a great point, Byron. We're fast running out of time on the Morgan Streetman Show. Thanks for the call, my friend. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.